The following stories were sent in by individuals working in sanitation and industrial cleaning. These are jobs that already deal with the things society wants to forget, but sometimes they uncover things that should have stayed hidden. This first story comes from a woman who worked as part of a specialized cleaning crew in Detroit. I've been working in industrial cleanup for about 5 years now. Most people can't handle the smell or just the general vibe of the places we have to go, but the money is good, and frankly, you get used to the grime after a while. We specialize in distressed properties in the Detroit area, foreclosures, former drug dens, squatter houses. Basically, if a building is rotting from the inside out, we're the ones they call to gut it before the renovators come in. I thought I had seen the worst of it. I've seen hoarder situations where you're wading through knee-deep garbage, and I've seen places painted with bodily fluids. It's gross, but it's just part of the job. You put on your hazmat suit, your respirator, and you get to work. But there was one house last November that changed the way I look at empty buildings. It was an old Victorian-style home that had been abandoned for at least a decade. It was known in the neighborhood as a crash pad for severe addicts. The police had cleared it out a week prior, and our job was to remove everything that wasn't nailed down so the construction crew could assess the structural damage. It was freezing that day, the kind of cold that seeps right through your layers. Inside, the house was even colder, a damp chill that felt heavy. My partner, Dave, took the ground floor, and I headed upstairs. The staircase groaned under my boots. The air up there was thick, even through my respirator filters. It smelled like ancient mold, burned chemicals, and something else, something coppery. I started clearing the bedrooms, tossing filthy mattresses and piles of ruined clothes out the windows into the dumpster below. It was routine until I got to the bathroom at the end of the hall. The door was hanging off one hinge. I pushed it open. It was a small space, claustrophobic. The toilet was shattered, but my eyes went straight to the clawfoot bathtub pushed against the far wall. It was filled to the brim with water, but it wasn't just water. It was an opaque, stagnant black sludge. It looked thick like tar. As I stepped closer, shining my flashlight directly into the tub, I noticed things glinting just beneath the surface of the black liquid. I realized with a jolt of disgust that they were razor blades, hundreds of them. Rusted, single-edged blades floating in the muck, and swirling around them were thick ribbons of dark red. It was unsettling, sure. It was definitely a biohazard, but then the atmosphere in that tiny bathroom shifted instantly. It wasn't a gradual creep, it was immediate. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees in a second, but the worst part was the physical sensation. An intense, crushing pressure slammed into my chest. It felt exactly like what I imagine a heart attack feels like. I couldn't draw a breath. My lungs felt paralyzed. It wasn't just panic. It was a physical weight pressing down on my sternum, squeezing the air out of me. At the same moment that pressure hit, the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. In that cramped little bathroom, with my back to the door, I suddenly knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't alone. I felt a presence standing directly behind me, inches away. I was staring at the black water in the tub, unable to move, paralyzed by this suffocating weight in my chest and the overwhelming dread that someone or something was right over my shoulder, watching me look at its handiwork. There was dead silence in the house. I couldn't hear Dave downstairs anymore, just the sound of my own shallow, panicked breaths struggling against the respirator. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. It felt like hours, but it was probably only seconds.
The instinct to survive finally kicked in. I spun around, fully expecting to collide with a squatter hiding in the dark. There was no one there. The hallway was empty. The pressure in my chest didn't leave, though. I scrambled out of that bathroom, nearly tripping down the stairs. I didn't even grab my tools. I burst out the front door into the freezing Detroit air, ripping my mask off, gasping. Dave found me by the truck, shaking. I told him I felt sick, that it was the fumes. I never told him about the pressure or the feeling of being watched. We finished the job, but I refused to go back upstairs. I let Dave handle the bathroom. When he came down, he didn't say anything about it, and I didn't ask. I still work in cleanup, but I don't do the abandoned houses anymore. I stick to office buildings and retail spaces. I can handle garbage, I can handle filth, but I can't handle that feeling of suffocating dread in a room where terrible things have happened.
Our second story takes us to the high plains of Wyoming, where the mountains meet the ranch lands. My grandfather was a hardened man. He spent his whole life ranching in Wyoming, and he wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories or urban legends. But during the summer of my sophomore year, I saw him break. We had been losing calves, not to disease, but to something that was literally tearing them apart in the middle of the night. My grandfather decided he was going to catch the predator in the act. He set up a chair in the hayloft of the barn, overlooking the main corral, and he let me sit with him as long as I promised to stay quiet. Around 3:15 a.m., the cattle started acting strange. They weren't lowing or running. They were huddling together in the center of the corral, shivering. The air felt heavy, like the pressure before a massive thunderstorm. Then I saw her. A woman climbed over the fence of the corral. She was wearing a tattered, filth-stained dress, but she wasn't walking. She was moving on all fours, her joints popping and snapping with every movement. It was completely unsettling. She approached a young calf that had been separated from the herd. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as she reached out with hands that looked more like talons. She didn't use a tool. She just started eating right there. She was tearing at the animal while it was still alive, her head jerking back and forth like a vulture. My grandfather raised his rifle, his hands shaking, something I had never seen before. He turned on the high-powered spotlight attached to the barn. The light hit the woman directly. She stopped and looked up. Her eyes weren't human. They reflected the light with a brilliant, predatory glow like a cat's. Her face was gaunt, her skin stretched tight over her skull. She didn't run. Instead, she opened her mouth and let out a hollow, echoing sound that didn't seem to come from her throat. It felt like it was coming from everywhere at once, vibrating in my very chest. My grandfather fired a shot into the dirt near her feet to scare her off. She leaped, literally leaped over the 6-foot corral fence in a single bound and vanished into the darkness of the plains. My grandfather didn't say a word. He just packed up his gear, walked me back to the house, and locked every door. We found the calf the next morning. It looked like it had been processed by a machine. He passed away a few years ago, and he took whatever he knew about that night to his grave. I stay away from the high plains now. I know that out there, in the vast, empty spaces, there are things that wear our skin but don't share our soul. Living in the Midwest, you get used to the isolation. In places like Nebraska or Kansas, the cornfields stretch out for miles, forming a literal wall of stalks that blocks out everything else. It's a quiet life, but when something goes wrong out there, you realize just how far away help really is. These stories prove that some things lurking in the rows aren't just predators, there's something else entirely. This first story takes place on a family farm in rural Nebraska. My family has owned our land for 3 generations. We've dealt with coyotes, foxes, and the occasional stray dog, but we know how to handle them. However, a few years ago, something started happening that didn't fit the pattern. We started losing chickens, but they weren't being dragged off or eaten on the spot. They were just gone. No feathers, no blood, no signs of a struggle. My father grew increasingly frustrated. He stayed up late with his shotgun, sitting on the porch, waiting for whatever was bypassing our fences. One Tuesday night, around 2 a.m., I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a bark or a growl. It was a high-pitched, rhythmic whistling from the edge of the cornfield. I looked out my bedroom window and saw my father standing in the yard, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Suddenly, the light hit something. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and incredibly gaunt. It was hunched over, its limbs appearing too long for its body. Before my dad could even yell, the thing bolted. It didn't run like a person. It moved with a sickening fluid speed, disappearing into the corn in a blur. My dad didn't hesitate. He ran toward the rows and fired a single shot from his 12-gauge into the dark where the thing had vanished. The sound that followed stayed with me for weeks. It wasn't the cry of an animal. It was a scream, a guttural, agonizing human scream that echoed across the flat plains. Then, dead silence. We searched the edge of the field that night, but found nothing. No body, no blood. The next morning, the local sheriff's truck pulled into our neighbor's driveway about a mile down the road. Our neighbor, Mr. Henderson, was an old man who lived alone. He had been found on his kitchen floor by a delivery driver. He was alive, but he had a massive, fresh wound in his right shoulder, a wound that the doctors later said looked exactly like a close-range blast from a shotgun. Mr. Henderson couldn't explain how it happened. He claimed he had fallen, but my father and I knew. We never spoke to him again, and we sold the farm 6 months later. There's something about the way the corn rustles at night now that gives me a permanent gut feeling of dread. This next story was sent in by Ricardo, who went camping with a friend in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. Me and my buddy Greg consider ourselves experienced campers. We hate crowded campgrounds, so we usually go off the trail, heading miles into the brush where we're guaranteed total privacy. That was our first mistake. We had set up camp in a small clearing near a creek. By midnight, the woods had fallen into a dead silence. There was no wind, no crickets, nothing. We were both asleep in our bags when I woke up to a sound that made my skin crawl. Zip. It was the sound of a tent zipper, very slow, very deliberate. I looked over at Greg. He was wide awake, his eyes dinner plate wide in the dark. The zipper on our tent door was slowly moving down. A hand
gloved in black, reached through the opening. Before we could react, the tent flap was ripped open. Two men stood there, silhouetted against the moonlight. They weren't wearing masks, but they were carrying tactical rifles. "Don't move," one of them growled. His voice was cold, professional. They dragged us out of our sleeping bags and threw us onto the damp ground. While one kept his rifle leveled at our heads, the other started going through our backpacks, tossing our gear everywhere. I felt a sense of overwhelming dread. I thought this was the end. "What are you doing out here?" the one with the gun asked. He kicked Greg in the ribs for not answering fast enough. "Just camping," I managed to choke out. "I didn't see anything, I swear." The man leaned down, his face inches from mine. He smelled like gasoline. "You're 500 yards from a very expensive piece of property," he whispered. "If I see you on this ridge again, you won't leave in one piece." I realized then they weren't just random thugs, they were guards. We had accidentally camped right on the perimeter of a massive forest meth lab. They didn't kill us. Instead, they spent the next 10 minutes beating us. Nothing broken, just enough to make sure we'd never forget the pain. Then they told us to run. No shoes, no gear, just the clothes on our backs. We ran through the dark, tripping over roots and rocks until the sun came up. We eventually found a road and flagged down a trucker. When we told the local sheriff, he just sighed and shook his head. He told us that part of the Smokies was a no-man's land. I still go camping, but never off-trail. And every time I hear a zipper in the middle of the night, I find myself reaching for a knife that isn't there.
This next story takes place on a lonely stretch of highway in West Texas. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing on the road isn't a ghost or a cult. It's a person who has completely lost their grip on reality. My friends and I were heading down to the coast for a girls' trip. It was late afternoon, and we were on a 2-lane highway that felt like it went on forever. There was nobody else out there, just miles of scrub brush and heat waves. I was driving when I noticed a black SUV in the rearview mirror. It was coming up fast, way faster than the speed limit. I figured they'd just pass me, so I stayed in my lane. But they didn't pass. They got right on my bumper. I'm talking inches away. "What is this person doing?" my friend Monica asked, looking back. I tapped my brakes to signal them to back off, and that's when it started. The SUV lunged forward and rammed us. A hard metallic crunch echoed through the car. We screamed. I tried to accelerate, but the SUV stayed pinned to my rear, ramming us again and again, trying to push us off the asphalt. The driver finally swerved to the side, pit maneuvering us. My car spun out, sliding off the shoulder and into a ditch. We were blinded by a cloud of Texas dust. Before we could even process what happened, the SUV doors flew open. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in full military fatigues, mismatched and dirty. She was holding a handgun, and she was pointing it directly at my windshield. "You did it! You woke him up! You nearly killed him with your noise!" She was sobbing and raging at the same time. She reached back into her SUV and pulled out a bundle wrapped in a filthy, stained baby blanket. She held it out toward us, her hand shaking so hard I thought the gun would go off accidentally. "Look what you did to my baby!" she shrieked. She pulled back the blanket. I expected to see something horrific, but it was worse in a different way. It was a plastic doll, a cheap, dirty doll with one eye missing and its hair matted with mud. She started cradling it, rocking back and forth, whispering to the plastic toy while keeping the gun leveled at my head. The contrast between the lethal weapon in one hand and the doll in the other was the most unsettling thing I've ever seen. "He's crying," she whispered, though the air was silent. "Do you hear him? He's crying because of you." Luckily, a state trooper happened to be patrolling that stretch of highway and saw the dust cloud from our crash. When the sirens faded in from the distance, the woman's expression shifted from rage to pure animalistic terror. She scrambled back into her SUV and tore off into the brush, driving overland through the desert. The cops caught her an hour later. Turns out she was a discharged vet who had suffered a massive mental breakdown and had been living out of her car for months. They found 3 other babies in her back seat, all dolls. We weren't hurt, but I can't close my eyes without seeing her face or hearing her scream about that doll. We never made it to the beach. We turned around and went home. Some roads are better left untraveled. When you work in the wilderness, you expect to run into predators, bears, mountain lions. Those are the things you're trained to handle. But the most dangerous things in the woods aren't the animals. It's the people who go there specifically because they don't want to be found. This first story comes from Hector, a forestry worker in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. It was late January, right after a massive blizzard had ripped through the northern range. My job was to head up into a remote sector of the national forest to inspect the fire roads and check for storm damage. At that altitude, the snow was 4 feet deep in some places, so I was on a snowmobile, miles away from the nearest paved road. I was checking a drainage basin when I noticed something unsettling. About half a mile off my designated path, tucked into a ravine that should have been empty, I saw a thin wisp of smoke rising from the trees. There were no permitted cabins in this area. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I parked the snowmobile and trekked the rest of the way on snowshoes. The cabin was small, built of rough-cut timber and covered in camouflage netting. It didn't look like a hunter's lodge. It looked like a bunker. As I got closer, the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of wood smoke. It was a sharp chemical stench, something like ammonia and burnt plastic. The door was slightly ajar. I should have turned around then. I had a massive gut feeling telling me to run, but I thought maybe someone was injured inside after the storm. I pushed the door open. The interior was a nightmare. There were no beds, just folding tables covered in industrial-sized bags of chemicals and precision scales. But it was the corner of the room that made me paralyzed with fear. Propped up against the wall were 3 AR-15s and several boxes of high-capacity magazines. This wasn't a survivalist's hut. It was a high-level drug operation. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the trees behind the cabin. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I spun around and saw 2 men in heavy winter gear coming down the ridge. One of them was unholstering a sidearm. I didn't stay to explain. I bolted. The first shot rang out, a sharp crack that echoed off the canyon walls. I heard the bullet whistle past my ear and thud into a pine tree. I wasn't just running, I was diving through the snow, using the terrain for cover. Another shot followed, then another. They weren't warning shots, they were trying to kill me. I reached my snowmobile, fumbled with the keys in a blind panic, and roared to life just as they reached the edge of the clearing. I pinned the throttle and didn't look back until I reached the ranger station 30 miles away. The authorities went up there 2 days later. The cabin was burnt to the ground. No chemicals, no guns, and no footprints left in the fresh snow. I quit that job a month later. You realize very quickly that in the mountains, no one can hear you scream. Most of us have been there, exhausted, hours away from home, and desperate to shave a few minutes off a long drive. We trust our GPS, or we trust our gut, thinking a back road couldn't possibly be that bad. But the thing about shortcuts is that they take you away from the light, away from the cameras, and away from any hope of help. This first story was sent in by a guy named Norberto, who learned the hard way that some roads aren't meant to be traveled. It was about 2 a.m. Me and 3 of my friends were driving back to our dorms after a long weekend away. We were in the deep backwoods of Kentucky, and according to the map, if we stayed on the main interstate, we were looking at another 3 hours of driving. We were exhausted. So when the GPS suggested a faster route via a series of county dirt roads, we took it without a second thought. Almost as soon as we veered off the paved highway, the atmosphere changed. The trees seemed to lean in over the car, and within 10 minutes, the bars on our phones vanished. No signal, just us and the high beams cutting through the dust. We were joking around to keep ourselves awake when my friend in the passenger seat suddenly shouted, "Stop! Stop the car!" I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammered against my ribs. Standing directly in the center of the road, maybe 20 feet ahead, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. She was wearing a tattered white dress and just standing there, motionless. I had this immediate, overwhelming gut feeling that something was wrong. This wasn't a lost child situation. It felt like a trap. Before I could even put the car in park to check on her, the girl looked up. Her face wasn't right. And then from the tree line on both sides of the road, figures began to emerge. They were men wearing long, dark robes. They weren't running. They were walking with a terrifying, synchronized purpose. "Get us out of here!" someone screamed from the back. I shifted into reverse, but I was panicking. I hit the gas too hard. The tires spun on the loose gravel, and the back of the car fishtailed, slamming hard into a massive oak tree. The engine stalled. Dead silence filled the cabin for a split second. Then a heavy thud vibrated through the frame of the car. Something had fallen onto the roof. I looked up through the sunroof, and my blood turned to ice. It was a body. A person, pale and limp, had dropped from the branches above. I looked out the side window and realized with a surge of dread that the trees weren't just empty woods. There were dozens of them, bodies hanging by their necks from the high branches, swaying slightly in the night breeze. The men in robes were closing in, and I saw one of them carrying a strip of heavy-duty spike strips to lay behind our tires. Adrenaline is a hell of a thing. I cranked the ignition, the engine roared to life, and I shifted into drive. I didn't care about the car anymore. I floored it, swerving around the little girl, who just stood there watching us with a blank expression, and felt the car bounce over something metallic. We heard the pop-pop of our rear tires, but I didn't stop. I drove on the rims for 3 miles until we hit a paved road and saw the lights of a gas station. The police went back the next morning, but they found nothing. No bodies in the trees, no men in robes, no little girl, just the skid marks from my tires and the remains of a spiked strip. I haven't taken a shortcut since. I'd rather drive for 10 hours on a bright highway than 10 minutes on a road like that.
Our next story comes from a man named Mark, who worked the graveyard shift at a large recycling facility in Ohio. Working nights at a recycling plant is a strange existence. The world is asleep, but you're surrounded by deafening noise. The machinery never stops. The grinders, the belts, the balers. You have to wear heavy-duty ear protection, which just isolates you even more. You can be standing 10 feet from a coworker, but you're in your own world, just watching the trash cycle past you for 8 hours straight. It's monotonous work. Your mind starts to wander. You start seeing things in the periphery. We all did. You'd catch a shadow moving out of the corner of your eye near the cardboard compactors. But when you turned, nothing was there. You just chalk it up to fatigue and the strobe light effect of the fluorescent lights reflecting off metal. I was working the glass line. It's probably the loudest part of the plant. Bottles and jars come down a high-speed conveyor belt and get dropped into a crusher. It sounds like a continuous car crash. It was around 3 a.m., that dead zone in the shift where it's hardest to stay alert. I was staring at the belt, hypnotized by the flow of brown and green glass, making sure no large contaminants got through. I looked up toward the beginning of the belt, where the material gets dumped from the upper level. About 50 feet up the line, lying flat on her back amidst a pile of beer bottles and spaghetti sauce jars, was a woman. I froze. My brain couldn't process it. She was perfectly still, her arms at her sides. She looked pale, almost gray under the harsh sodium lights. She was dressed in dark clothing that blended in with the belts. For a second, I thought it was a mannequin. People throw away weird stuff. But as she got closer, the belt vibrating beneath her, I saw her hair move slightly with the motion. It wasn't plastic. It was real hair. Panic seized me. She was heading straight for the crusher. That machine doesn't just break glass, it pulverizes everything into dust. I ripped off my earmuffs, screaming, but the noise of the plant swallowed my voice instantly. I lunged for the emergency stop button on the control panel, slamming my hand down on it. The massive gears groaned to a halt. The silence that followed was sudden and overwhelming, ringing in my ears. I ran along the catwalk alongside the belt to where I had seen her. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was terrified of what I was about to find, a mangled body caught in the intake chute. But when I got there, the belt was empty. There were just bottles and jars piled up where the belt had made its sudden stop. No woman, no body, nothing. I checked everywhere. I looked under the belt, in the intake chute. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold my flashlight steady. Other workers started coming over, asking why I hit the e-stop. I told the foreman I thought I saw a large obstruction. I didn't want to say I saw a person and then have nothing to show for it. They'd think I was on drugs or losing my mind from lack of sleep. They started the line back up, and I finished the shift in a daze, flinching every time a larger-than-average bag came down the line. A few days later, during a lunch break, I was talking to one of the old-timers, a guy who had been at the plant for 20 years. We were talking about weird things people throw away. He leaned in close and said, "You know the worst thing? It's the urns." I asked him what he meant. "Funeral urns," he said, taking a bite of his sandwich. People clean out their grandparents' attics. They find these heavy vases, don't know what they are, or just don't care. They toss them in the recycling bin, thinking they're metal or glass. He pointed toward the glass crusher. We find them busted open at the end of the line sometimes, just gray dust mixed with the crushed glass. It's sad, really.
people getting their final rest in a recycling crusher. My stomach dropped. I thought back to the woman on the belt, how pale she looked, how still she was. I don't know for sure what I saw that night. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was a trick of the light, but I can't shake the feeling that I saw someone's resting place had just been dumped onto a conveyor belt, about to be processed into nothing. I quit a week later. I couldn't handle the noise of the crusher anymore. Every time it fired up, I just pictured that gray dust mixing with the glass.